Today we're working on lesson 5.2, which is using intercepts. So today's objective is you're going to identify, interpret, and use intercepts in linear relationships. We're going to start with vocabulary for the lesson. There's only 2 vocabulary words. First one is Y-intercept. This should all just be review from last year in 8th grade. Your Y-intercept, it's where the graph crosses the y-axis. Where the graph crosses the y-axis. So for instance, if I have a graph here, the x-axis, the y-axis, bless you, and I graph this line. The y-intercept is going to be where the graph crosses the y-axis. So right here, this point where your graph hits on the y-axis, that's called your y-intercept. And every time you write the y-intercept, you write it as a point, and it's always going to be written as 0, blank. Everyone should be taking notes right now. So the y-intercept is always written as a point, and it's always going to be 0, blank. Then we have the X-intercept. And that's where the graph crosses the x-axis. Oops. Where the graph crosses the x-axis is the X-intercept. So that'll be on the graph that I already created. That's going to be this point. That'll be the X-intercept, and the X-intercept is always written as a point, blank, 0. So the X and Y intercepts are just where your graph hits the x-axis, where it hits the y-axis. Okay, for example number 1, you're going to need some graph paper. It's going to say identify the X and Y intercepts. Okay, go ahead and create an x-axis and a y-axis. Put a dot on the y-axis at +2. So draw an x-axis and a y-axis. From that y-intercept, go down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. Go down 1 over 2 again. Then get a straight edge. Connect it with a nice straight line. And put arrows on both ends because this line goes on forever. Okay, then for this graph, we need to identify the x-intercept and then the y-intercept. When we list these points, you have to list them out as a coordinate, so an x and y pair. Make sure everybody's caught up first. So to find the x-intercept, find your x-axis, so your x-axis goes left to right. Where the graph hits the x-axis, that point right there, that is your x-intercept. When we write x-intercept, we're always going to write it as a point. It hits at positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 0. You have to list it as a point. If you just put 4, I'm going to mark it wrong. And then the y-intercept, just find your y-axis and where the graph crosses the y-axis. Our y-intercept is at 0, comma, it's positive 1, 2. 0, comma 2. So when you list out your x-intercept and y-intercept, make sure you list them as points. Put parentheses, put commas, all that stuff. Okay, we're going to do one more like that. Okay, get another piece of graph paper. Draw on your x and y axis. I usually label my x-axis and my y-axis, so if that helps you, go ahead and put your x and y on it. Okay, on your y-axis, go ahead down to -5. So start at 0, 0 and go down 5. And put a dot. From that dot, go up 1 over 1. Put a new dot. Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And then connect the dots with a nice straight edge. And put arrows on both ends because it goes on forever. And then cut that out and put that into your math notebook. Scissors. Okay, from this graph, go ahead and write down what's the x-intercept and what's the y-intercept. So look at the graph and label it as a point. So your x-intercept is where it hits the x-axis. So that's right here. Your x-intercept is at positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5, 0. Right down here is your y-intercept, and that is at 0, comma, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5. Okay, any questions on that? Super easy. Okay, so obviously if they give you a graph, it's easy to find the intercepts. You just look at it. Here is where you're usually going to do your work, though, because a lot of times, especially by high school, you're not always going to get these nice, pretty graphs where it hits perfectly. A lot of time, it's going to hit in the middle. You can't just guess on a graph. You have to know the exact answer. So to figure out the exact answer, you're going to have to do the algebra for it anyhow. Most of us don't want to graph. I get it. You guys hate graphing. So doing the algebra portion of it is so much easier anyhow. So you guys are probably going to prefer doing it this way. Okay, this is example 2 now. Example 2, bless you again, is going to say find the intercepts. So we need to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Okay, 2a, the equation is 3x minus 2y equals 6. right now this equation is in standard form, right? The x and the y are on the same side of the equal sign, and the constant's on the other side. So if you wanted to, yeah, you can put this into slope-intercept form, or you can pick some x values or whatever, and you can graph it. But the issue is, if it doesn't hit perfectly, you're still going to have to go back to doing the math anyhow. So what we're going to do is just do the math. So you're going to split your paper into two sections. We're going to do the problem twice. First, we're going to do it to find the x-intercept. Then we're going to do it to find the y-intercept. To do the x-intercept is always listed as blank, comma, 0. The y-intercept is always listed as 0, comma, blank. Underneath those, go ahead and write x, y, x, y. I've been doing this, I don't know how many years, and I still, every time I do intercepts, I still write it out like this. This is the easiest way to help. Also, everyone should be taking notes now. I don't want to hear you later saying, I don't get what to do, and then I go by and you have nothing written down. This is the time to practice it. So what you're doing is, I want to know what is x when y is 0. So you're taking this equation, and all we're doing is substituting in the 0 for the y. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to figure out when x is 0, what does y become? So you're just going to do the problem again and substitute 0 in for x. So let's go ahead and do the x-intercept. Let me zoom in a little. Okay, the x-intercept is when y is 0. So you're taking the original equation, 3x minus 2y equals 6. But now, instead of putting the y, we're going to put in a 0. So I'm going to bring everything down. I have a lot of you, when I'm coming through, especially when you guys are doing the table of values and you have to plug in numbers for x, you are writing it and you're not doing multiplication. When it's like a coefficient, keep in mind that's multiplication, 2 times y. Put parentheses to signify multiplication. Stop putting that x like you did, like the multiplication symbol from like 3rd grade. Stop writing that. That looks like a variable for algebra. So put it in parentheses. It'll make your life easier. Okay, if it helps, draw your line going down from your equal sign. We're just solving this for x, which we've done 1,000 times in here. Okay, here's a step that I'm hoping eventually you don't actually need to do. You should be able to do this in your head. But 2 times 0. So you're always going to simplify first. So 2 times 0 is 0. 3x minus 0 is just going to be 3x, right? So eventually, you don't need to write down this whole step. I'm hoping you're going to get to the point where you're like, okay, I know that's going to be, it's just going to end up being 3x. And I still have 6 over here. I'm still just solving the equation for x. Look at the side that has the x. Right now it says 3 times x. When things are touching, they're multiplying. So to undo multiplying by 3, we're going to divide by 3. The division property of equality says if I do it to one side of the equal sign, I have to do it to the other side of the equal sign. 3 divided by 3 is 1x. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And we always write it as a point. 2, 0. So your x-intercept is 2, 0. Okay, now we just do the same thing, except this time we're going to substitute in 0 for x. So again, take that whole equation, 3x minus 2y equals 6. We're going to write it again, but instead of putting x, we're going to put in a 0. So 3x becomes 3 times 0 minus 2y's equals 6. If it helps, draw your line going down from your equal sign to see the left and right side of the equation. Simplify any math that can be done, like the 3 times 0. 3 times 0 is just 0. Take away 2y. 0 take away 2y is just negative 2y. Hopefully this part eventually you don't really need to do. You can kind of do this part in your head. However, don't forget this minus sign in front of the 2 needs to still come down. It doesn't just disappear. Okay, so this says negative 2 times y. So to undo multiplying by negative 2, divide by negative 2. Don't forget to divide by the negative though. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. If you have phones out, you better put those away. I have 1y equals 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. I don't want to hear you crying later that I don't understand how to do this, yet you sit there on your phones. Put your phone away. It shouldn't be in your lap. It shouldn't be in your pocket. You know you have no self-control and you're going to be on it. Okay, that's all we got to do then. So X-intercept, you're just going to do the problem. Y-intercept. Okay, let's try that again. Easy peasy. Okay, the equation is negative 5x plus 6y equal 60. Negative 5x plus 6y equals 60. I'm going to split it into two columns. I'm going to do the X-intercept and then the Y-intercept. The X-intercept is always going to be blank, comma, 0. The Y-intercept is always 0, comma, blank. When I write this out, this is always my X and my Y, my X and my Y. Okay, we're going to do the problem first. And we're going to substitute in 0 for y. So you're going to rewrite this whole question, except instead of putting the y, we're going to substitute in 0 for y. From here, if it helps, draw your line going down from your equal sign. You're going to simplify any work that you can do first, like 6 times 0. 6 times 0 is just 0. Negative 5x plus 0 is just negative 5x. Again, I do hope that eventually you don't have to write this down, that part. I'm okay with you doing that in your head. Okay, look at the side that has the x. Instead of multiplying by negative 5, we're going to divide by negative 5. $60 divided by negative 5 is negative 12. Do not write x equals negative 12 and circle that. I will mark that wrong. The x-intercept is negative 12, comma 0. That's the point. X equals 12 is a vertical line. So don't put x equals 12. Okay, let's try it for y now. So the y-intercept, you're going to do the whole math problem, but we're plugging in 0 for x. So negative 5x becomes negative 5 times 0 plus 6y equals 60. You should be doing this work as well, not just watching me do it. We always simplify first. Negative 5 times 0 is just 0. 0 plus 6y is just 6y. And then divide by 6. Y equals 10. And again, write this as a point. It's always going to be 0, comma, and then whatever that number is. Okay, ready to do them on your own? Yes, Ms. Clarkson. Okay. Number 1. 8x plus 7y equals 28. Go ahead and find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Okay, the x-intercept was 3.5, comma 0. Y-intercept was 0, 4. Make sure you wrote it as a point. Okay, here's another one to do on your own. Negative 6x minus 8y equals 24. negative 6x minus 8y's equals 24. Go ahead and figure out what's the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So your x-intercept, make sure you have it written as a point, is negative 4, 0, and your y-intercept was 0, negative 3. Okay, now we're going to move on to word problems. Example 3. In example 3, it's going to ask you to find and interpret. Find and interpret the intercepts. So you need to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. You also need to interpret, and I need you to write this down. If you had me last year, you know what I mean. When it says interpret, this means I want you to write a sentence. Anytime it says interpret, you need to write me a full sentence explaining what it means. Like I usually say, like, if you have to dumb down what you're talking about to somebody who has no idea what we're doing. So if you have to tell somebody what the x-intercept means, because it's going to be a word problem, I want you to write a sentence explaining it to somebody who has no idea what's going on. What does that x-intercept mean? And then what does that y-intercept mean? So anytime you see, especially on your tests, if it says find and interpret, that means you need to tell me what the x-intercept is and tell me what it means, find the y-intercept, and tell me what it means. Okay, here's the word problem. I'm going to read it out loud to you, and then we will just write down the important information. The Sandia Peak Tramway in Albuquerque, New Mexico, travels a distance of about 4,500 meters to the top of the Sandia Peak. Its speed is 300 meters per minute. The function f of x equals blah, 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 gives the tram's distance in meters from the top of the peak after x minutes. Okay, so it's one of, like at Snowball, you know, the little carts and stuff. So there's a tram that's coming from the top of the mountain. The equation or the function is f of x. It gives us this in the word problem. F of x equals 4,500 minus 300x. It tells me the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain is about 4,500 meters. The top of the mountain is about 4,500 meters. The speed of the tram is going 300 meters per minute. The speed it's going at is 300 meters every minute. And it tells me x stands for minutes. Okay, so it's the directions are saying to find the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and then tell me what they both mean. So we're going to figure out the x-intercept, and then we're going to figure out the y-intercept. To do x-intercept, that's always something comma 0. The y-intercept is always 0 comma something. It's always x, y, x, y. Okay, the equation, it's in function notation. Remember, this is just a fancy way. F of x is just a fancy way of saying y equals, right? This really says y equals 4,500 minus 300x. If you don't know that, write that down. F of x is the same as just y. So when I go to do my x-intercept, don't forget that this is your y, the f of x. Okay, so to do the x-intercept, the equation again is y equals 4,500 minus 300x. I'm going to substitute in 0 for the y. So instead of y, I'm going to put a 0 equals, and then bring everything down. And now we're just solving the equation for x. So if it helps, draw a line going down from your equal sign. Look at the side that has the variable. We just want to get x by itself, so look at the side with the variable. If it helps, cover up the side that doesn't have a variable. We always get rid of the constant first. So that's the positive 4,500. So to get rid of it, we subtract 4,500. If I subtract it from one side, I have to subtract it from the other. That's the subtraction property of equality. 0 take away 4,500 is negative 4,500. $4,500 minus 4,500 is 0. I still have a minus 300x. Don't forget to bring down that minus sign. It does not just disappear. It's still there, so bring it down. Look at the side that has the x. When things are touching, they mean multiply. So this says negative 300 times x. So to undo multiplying by negative 300, we're going to divide by negative 300. The division property of equality tells me I have to do it to the other side also. Negative 4,500 divided by negative 300 gets me 15. So your x-intercept is 15, 0. I'm going to wait to write the sentence because I have to interpret it, but I'm going to wait and do that. Okay, we're going to do the same thing now to find the y-intercept. So the original equation is y equals 4,500 minus 300x. But now we're going to substitute in 0 for x. Make sure you're taking notes, because too often you guys think you know what you're doing, and then you go home later and you forget everything. And then when it comes time for the quiz, you're lost. Okay, here you're just doing the math. Just simplify this section. We always multiply before we subtract, right? So 300 times 0 is just 0. 4,500 minus 0 is just 4,500. I still have y equals over there, so now I'm done. My y-intercept is 0, 4,500. Okay, to help you write this sentence, I'm going to draw a quick sketch of what this graph kind of would look like. I'm not going to use graph paper. I'm just going to do a messy graph over here. So the x-intercept on the x-axis would be 15. The y-intercept would be 4,500. So then I would have a line that's coming down like this. The x, it says, is minutes. The y is going to be how many meters. Okay, so I'm talking about this tram on the mountain. So I need to write a sentence on what this 15, 0 actually means for the whole situation. So again, there's this tram that's coming down the mountain. Its speed is 300 meters per minute. The distance from the top of the peak after X minutes. This 15 minutes, at 15 minutes, you're going to be at 0 meters. So as a sentence, you would write oh shoot. Oh my gosh, sorry. There we go. Okay, so that 15 just means at 15 minutes, it's going to be at 0 meters. So it's going to take 15 minutes to come down the mountain. So your sentence should be something like, it takes 15 minutes. So it's on a tram. Remember, it's at the top of the mountain. It just means it takes 15 minutes till it gets to the bottom of the mountain. So when you write your sentence, it just needs to be something like that. Then we have to do another sentence for what this Y-intercept means. At 0 minutes, you're 4,500 meters up. So it's just something along the lines of the tram starts at 4,500 meters. Because that's the height of the mountain. So you're going to be at the top of the mountain, which is 4,500 meters, before you start your descent of coming down. Okay, we're going to do one more word problem today, and then we're going to be done for today. We'll finish this lesson tomorrow. Anyone still need that up? Okay. Same thing. We're going to have a word problem. We have to state what the intercepts are, and then write sentences. Okay, the word problem is a hot air balloon is 750 meters above the ground and begins its descent at a constant rate of 25 meters per minute. The function blah, blah, blah represents the height of the hot air balloon after X minutes. Okay, so the hot air balloon is already in the air. It has an equation of f of x equals, and then in the word problem it tells me it, 750 minus 25x. So some important information. It starts 750 meters in the air. It descends, or comes down, descends at 25 meters per minute. So when the hot air balloon is coming down, it comes down 25 meters each minute. X stands for minutes. We need to come up with the X-intercept, say what it means, Y-intercept, what does it mean? Okay, first, rewrite this equation using Y. So take it out of function notation and just put it into the Y equals format. So that means the f of x just becomes y. So it really says y equals 750 minus 25x. Now figure out what's the x-intercept and then the y-intercept. So take the equation and plug in 0 for y. Go ahead and work on that by yourself. You should have done is subtract 750 from both sides. And then divide by the coefficient. Negative 750 divided by negative 25 is 30. So the x-intercept is 30, 0. And then go ahead now and do that for the the y-intercept. Plug in 0 for x. So 25 times 0 is just 0. 750 minus 0 is just 750. So y is 750. Okay, from here now we have to write the sentences on what this actually means. If it helps to create just a rough sketch of what the graph would look like, your x-intercept is 30, so that means on the x-axis at 30, it would hit the y-axis at 750, it would hit. X is minutes, and the y is the meters. So this 30, if I have to write a sentence on what that means, remember we're talking about a hot air balloon that's coming down? Bless you. So it just takes 30 minutes for the hot air balloon to land. So the X Intercept just means it's how long it's going to take to land. So it's 750 feet in the air, and it keeps coming down 25 meters each minute. It's going to take 30 minutes to land to be at 0 meters. And then the 0,750, what that represents is at 0 minutes, it's 750 feet in the air. So I would write it as something like before descending, before it starts coming down. The hot air balloon is 750 meters in the air. So while it's just up there, before it starts coming down, before it starts the descent, it's 750 meters in the air. So anytime it says interpret, I need a sentence. Okay, we're going to pause there. Tomorrow we will finish the lesson. Some of you owe me work from yesterday you never turned in, so please check Power Schools and see if you owe me anything.